Hey guys,
Well,
I'm not actually sure if anyone's here. I don't see anyone in chat. I haven't really advertised it, but I do want to um, get through a couple of Van Gogh letters, so probably best if no one's here. So I'm going to jump right in without any further ado. You guys may remember that the previous letter we dealt with was the 7th or 8th of September, and we quite far behind. It's now the 16th of October. We need to catch up. So I'm going to try and get through a couple of letters today. Um, Vincent wrote this letter 7th to 8th September, and then Thea only replied 10, day, 10 days later. It's quite a long time. And Vincent was really not in a very good place at the time. So, anyway, we're going to jump right into this letter. Um, just a little bit of news. I'll be doing probably in a week or two Van Gogh letters from France. So that should be quite exciting for those of you who have kept up to date. Anyway, let's jump right in. Okay. So this is from Theo to Vincent. My dear Vincent, I have put off replying to your last letter as I'd hoped to meet Father Pissarro. He has gone back home now but intends to return to Paris shortly. When Father Tanguy and I had a talk, we already touched upon the question of whether there might be a means of bringing about the arrangement you speak of. And I think that arrangement is basically that that Vincent could leave the asylum and go and stay with Father is it Father Pissarro is an artist, and then he could sort of live with this elderly artist and paint there. And Pissarro, I think, was based pretty close to Orvez, which is north of Paris, and so he was hoping to get out of the asylum using this kind of scheme. And anyway, he says, but then there came the death of his mother, that's Pissarro's mother. And he says, so that it was not the right moment. Last year, Dehan wanted to go and stay with him, but then he said he didn't have enough room. And he went to look for accommodation at the houses of his neighbors, but in vain. So already in October, you have a situation of Vincent trying to get out of the asylum that he sort of he signed himself up to go into. Now he's literally trying to get out of jail in a way. Anyway, he goes on to say, I spoke about it with Juve, who promised me to be on the lookout for an arrangement, for staying with him is impossible through lack of room. Chelsea, really good to see you. If we've got one person here, that's definitely enough. But he has got his studio. He gives the impression of being better off now that he has found work as a decorator. He's a man with a lot of common sense. But as regards what is essential, to know whether your health is going to improve, whether you're going to live with one or the other of these people, that is the great question. Now, I've already read this letter, and what's quite fascinating about it is Theo reveals his insight into, and that's why I use this as the what do you call it, the title to this particular video. I think that the only thing which can cure you is for you to try to fortify your body, and that to me seems to show that Theo had a unique insight into his brother. I mean, because he was absolutely right. We're going to get to that in a moment where he speaks about it more in more detail. I'm not quite sure why the light on me is. I don't know whether the yellow reflects or whatever, but not quite sure that why the light on me is so dull and dark. I've got all the lights on, but it is what it is. Um, anyway, he goes on to say, when you speak of conquering, and this is it. He says, when you speak of conquering your disease by work, my dear old fellow, you never did anything else. And for this reason, you need not change your way of life. This, I think, is a very nice way, diplomatic way um, for Theo to basically say, that's not going to work. Basically, if you think you're going to deal with your disease just by working, Well, you've been doing that your whole life. That's not the thing that needs to change, right? And Josh, I just feel like my face is a lot duller. But I mean, if it's good for you, then it's fine. Do you follow the line of reasoning? As um, Theo is being a little cynical, but I think rightfully so. Basically saying, if you think just working hard is going to change things, you've done that your whole life. I don't think it's going to change things. And although I think that is part of the equation, Van Gogh did need to have something to do. The other side of the story was he needed to eat properly. He needed, like 3 square meals, and he needed to kind of behave. Not womanize, not go to brothels, not drink. And bear in mind, because he's got syphilis, which is a little bit like having. Some doctors might laugh at me if I say this, but I think it's a little bit like having strep throat. You've got a serious bacterial infection, and the only way to fight it is to really fortify your body, allow your body to rest. Conversely, by the way, you can die of strep throat, you can die of sepsis kind of thing. You can die of a bacterial infection. So the only way to put it this way, one way to hurt your chances of survival is to not get enough sleep, not get enough rest, not eat properly, and live in a sort of reckless fashion in more ways than one. I think you know what I'm getting at. The converse is how to defeat an infection. Well, get enough sleep, get enough rest, don't drink a lot, don't engage in reckless behavior. Basically, all things in moderation. And of course, the one thing they didn't have then was antibiotics. Of course, if your body can come up with the resources, then that's almost the same as an antibiotic. Anyway, so let's continue. So Theo says, on the contrary, I think that the only thing which can cure you is for you to try to fortify your body. And he's absolutely right, isn't he? He says, and those dark thoughts will vanish as soon as you have some more blood in your body. And so, Theo also repeats, acknowledges, um, um, admits that the sentiments Vincent has communicated have landed with him, that his brother is in quite a dark place, his brother is despairing, his brother is having quite negative, to put it mildly, thoughts, right? Basically saying, if your body is stronger, your mind will be stronger as well. And if you guys can indulge me, I see there's 7 of you guys in chat. If you guys will indulge me for a moment, about a week ago, I suddenly felt inexplicably weak. I had a fever, but I felt very, very weak. I think on one particular day, I just suddenly slept, slept for 4 or 5 hours, woke up, was about to get up, just thought I'll just sleep for another 10 minutes, slept for another several hours. I'm not sure how much I slept, but it must easily have been 14, 16 hours. And if you asked me what is going on with you, I don't know what the answer is, but I think I drank contaminated water. All I know is since I've been drinking bottled water, um, those symptoms have slowly disappeared. But I definitely felt extremely weak, extremely tired. Those are some of the symptoms of drinking contaminated water. I suppose I could also have eaten contaminated food, but I don't really remember doing that. I suppose it's possible. But the point is, in a situation like that, how do you recover? Well, you rest, right? In the absence of medication, how do you recover? You rest. How do you not recover? Well, one of the things I could have gone and done is interval running, and I didn't mean like my body wanted or my mind wanted to go and swim and train, and I just thought this is not a good idea. You're not feeling 100%. And so what did I do? I rested and rested and rested, and eventually I came right. Also, you need to eat properly. Don't eat junk. Eat vegetables and fruit, and eat regularly, and all that kind of thing. So, this does kind of make sense. And bear in mind, this was September, October 1889. They didn't have the best doctors. They couldn't do a thing like a blood test. They couldn't quickly ascertain, like what is going on. Yvonne, good to see you here. It's always good having you part of chat. Yeah, rest is definitely more important. Okay, so he says, I am always afraid when you are working that way in a frenzy, for you necessarily exhaust yourself by it, right? And you can imagine Van Gogh as this intense artist. I think Gauguin definitely experienced that, this frenzied artist. This guy really got caught up in what he's doing. On the one hand, it's kind of good for art, that intensity. It's good for the creativity, the creative juices are flowing, all of that's good. On the other hand, if it's constant, if it's a constant intensity, it is going to lead to exhaustion, right? And I think that is what happened here. Um, I think I'm going to finish this letter. It's not actually such a long letter. And then I'm going to deal with something that happened in the last week or so that for me is a very interesting insight into, I think, human nature. It was an insight that came from nature, but I think it's a very interesting insight into human nature, and also into criminal psychology, potentially. So I'll deal with that at the end of this letter. So let's quickly finish it off. He says, I understand that idleness is a weight on your mind, especially if you have no company to your liking. Um, this again shows to what extent Theo understands his brother. He basically says, you know what? If you're alone, I can understand how not being busy is going to open the psychological door to loneliness, to the extent of your loneliness, the extent to which you are alone. And so, in a way, that busyness, that frenzy of work, that intensity, almost pushes aside that reality for him, and so is in the company of his feelings, and is kind of, in a way, in a journey, on like a creative journey in terms of what he's doing. But as soon as that frenzy lowers to an extent, then the pain, the sort of unmitigated, unfiltered pain of I'm all alone, I'm all alone in this world, kind of comes back. And that is a thing that I think is very underappreciated with Van Gogh. I think people think of Van Gogh as this tortured artist, this troubled artist, this mad artist. But I think the parts that they don't think about is the obvious things, that he was really lonely, and also was that he had syphilis. And I do think there might be. I mean, think about it. Could there be a relationship between him being lonely and syphilis? And think about it logically. Lonely, 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 and then syphilis. Lonely, 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 syphilis. Where's the syphilis coming from? Well, it's coming from lonely, lonely, lonely. So lonely, lonely, lonely Van Gogh doesn't want to feel lonely. What does he go and do? Well, he does something, and then he gets syphilis. Do you follow what I'm trying to say? I really do think there's a very simple equation at work here. If he wasn't so lonely, he wouldn't have syphilis. Um, in other words, if he was in the company of a long-term girlfriend or a wife or a friend, even, he probably would not have. Bear in mind, if he was going to go to a brothel, he didn't have a lot of money, so he would be paying for the worst. How can I put it? Um, I don't want to. I don't want to say something strange, but um, yeah, you would basically not be paying for the healthiest choice, if I can put it in that way, right? Anyway, so let's continue. He says, when you come here, there's the danger of finding company that will innovate you. So his brother also understands that, Theo also understands that Vincent's quite an excitable fellow. And I think when we have, what's the word? When we've talked about him, a lot of people in chat have kind of, with stars in their eyes, said, "Oh, I'd love to um, go for a walk with Van Gogh. Oh, I wish he was alive. I wish I could go and have dinner with him." I don't know if is that you. Like, is there anyone here who would like to do that? Right? And I probably would. Like, I wouldn't mind. But what I think you imagine that would be like, and I think the reality is completely different. Is there anyone here? Vandy Mas, good to see you. Is there anyone here that feels like, wow, it would be amazing to spend some time with this artist? Um, well, it might not be amazing in the way that you think. Probably Van Gogh would do all the talking. Probably Van Gogh would be very kind of excited and excitable. Probably he would be very also awkward in a way. I don't know if he would ask very much about you. He'd be talking about um, a lot of the stuff that's in his letters. He'd probably smell. He'd probably have bad breath as well. If you're a woman, he would probably say, "Do you mind if I paint your portrait?" And you might say, "Okay, well, not right now. Can we just chat?" And you might be like, "I really want to paint your portrait. Can you just tell me that you're willing to do it," kind of thing. And yeah, it might sort of come across quite clingy and desperate and intense. And the conversation that you have wouldn't necessarily be a two-way conversation. Might be kind of a one-way conversation. But what you probably wouldn't expect is that this person who speaks in such a civilized way, who's so sensitive, when you're actually with him, would probably come across quite different. He'd probably, in a way, walk all over you. He would do, as I say, all the talking. He'd get very emotional. He'd get very caught up in what he's talking about, and might sort of walk all over you in terms of conversation. Um, in short, you might feel quite put off, right? Because a lot of people did. A lot of people did feel put off. Chelsea says, "I'd let him paint my portrait." Okay. I think when he did that, when he painted someone's portrait, he was absolutely silent. He didn't talk while he was painting. It was a very serious business. Blue Flame, good to see you. What I'm trying to illustrate here is when Theo says, there's the danger of finding company that will innovate you. In other words, there's the danger that when you're with certain people, you're going to get really excited. Like it's not like people going out for drinks, getting excited and happy. It's getting almost manic, like where you like totally out of control, right? And Vincent seems, or Theo seems to be aware of what happened with Gauguin, that Vincent got very overexcited because he was with another artist. And if he is in Paris, he may encounter one artist after another who just has a different opinion to him. And Van Gogh might almost like pass out of sort of the frenzy of trying to get through to them to say, this is what I believe in, this is what I'm feeling, this is where art needs to go. and that he almost like passes out from the effort of the intensity of what he's trying to convey. And Theo's saying, I don't know if that's going to be good for you, right? So you can see Theo does really understand his brother's condition physically, but also his mental vulnerability, if you want to put it that way, right? Do you agree? Um, okay, well, that's quite an interesting point. If you told him to zip it, do you think he would? Or maybe he would. Okay, then he says, I should say, go into the country somewhere where there's some forgotten artist, but you know how much you suffer from cold, as long as you're not absolutely well. So there again, he knows that his brother in winter is a lot unhealthier than his brother in summer. And that also is that pattern is also a very important clue that Van Gogh's health is already, his immunity is already compromised, just in a general sense. So that simply by virtue of it being winter, his brother then gets sick and struggles and suffers, right? That's already telling you that he's already pretty seriously compromised in a general sense. Um, so what Theo is advocating here generally is the right remedy for Vincent, which is, he says, I should say, go into the country somewhere. In other words, don't go to a city where there is temptation, bars, brothels, lots of people. Rather go to where there are fewer people, but also fewer of those kinds of establishments and fewer temptation and basically just less of a certain kind of stimulus, and let the countryside stimulate, the change of seasons, but also there are fewer people around you to um, affect your state of mind, right? And then he goes on to say, according to Reveille, and also according to what I conclude from Mr. Peyron's letters, it should be Dr. Peyron, there's a possibility which you would rather not believe, but it is absolutely necessary that you do nothing imprudent and that you stay under the supervision of a doctor. Now, one can only wonder what that means, where he says, it is absolutely necessary that you do nothing imprudent. It seems like quite a formal way of saying don't F up, don't go to a brothel, don't get drunk on absinthe, don't um, act in some unhinged way. Like be disciplined be self disciplined, right? Mel Stiller, good to see you here. Okay, so then he goes on to say, and that you stand under the supervision of a doctor. Do you want to go to a sanatorium here until the winter is over and then go into the country to paint? Please give a categorical answer to this. So his brother's basically feeling like, Vincent, you can leave this asylum, but you probably need to go to another asylum somewhere else. Basically, you need to be under someone's custody or care, right? He's basically acknowledging that Vincent can't take care of himself, right? And so he's asking him, do you consent to this? Then he says, and by the way, it's not unfair for Theo to say this, because Vincent himself said this before he went into the asylum. He says, I can't do this. I can't look after myself. I can't. I think he even said, I can't stay alone. Basically, he was basically giving up. And, this is quite close to the air incident, but also he'd been thrown out of the town. And his priority at that moment, I don't know if you guys remember, was, I can't be alone. And then he sort of felt, even being in an asylum, I'll be near people, and that's better than being alone. And now that he's been in it for a couple of months, maybe well, he still doesn't want to be alone, but the asylum is turning out to be pretty horrible. By the way, if there's anyone here that's new here, the picture you see in the background is literally 2 or 3 minute cycle outside Sangami and that little town where the asylum was. I'm actually going to be traveling there in about 2 weeks' time. So I'll be sharing photos, more photos from there, and sights and sounds. So it should be quite interesting. Okay. So then he says, why do you why do you stay locked up and why don't you go out into the fresh air? So it seems like this is Vincent's choice. It doesn't seem like someone told him he can't go out. It seems like he's saying, why don't you go out into the fresh air? He says, this can only do you good, whereas a sedentary life won't do at all for you. And then there it is. It is also necessary for you to eat meat. So Theo's basically saying, you know what? You need to fortify your body. And if Vincent said, how should I do that? Well, one way is to eat meat. You will probably have received the pains from Tassays, and a little bit of a change of subject. As for the second consignment of white, it will reach you within a very short time, for he didn't have any of it in stock. There are 3 pictures by Mounier at the exhibition, which you would have seen with pleasure. One of them is a study of red roofs above which rise the chimney stacks of factories, all of which have heavy streaks of smoke standing out against a milky morning sky. Now, what's incredible with Theo is maintaining Vincent, he's giving him money. Theo is maintaining Vincent by giving him paints and other supplies. Theo is looking after his brother by listening to his problems and listening to what his doctors are saying and basically being involved in his care in a certain way. But that's not the end of it. A big part of their friendship and their relationship and their mutual understanding is that Theo is an art dealer. His brother used to be an art dealer, and Vincent is an artist who's going to one day become one of the most popular and beloved, and expensive artists in history. And Theo actually recognizes that. Theo recognizes potential in his brother, although he didn't recognize much in Starry Night. But the important thing is that, and this is where I think Vincent doesn't feel alone, is that he can speak to his brother in a very authentic way, in a very raw, real, be himself way about art, and his brother on the other side knows exactly what he's talking about. And from his brother's side, his brother can talk about some of the latest news in art, which, if it's almost like Vincent's in a prison, he's like getting news reports from the horse's mouth, from the art industry, as it were. And as a result of that, news from Theo means so much to Vincent. He's really getting someone who's so lost and isolated and alone. This is kind of a avenue into this greater world that he wants to be part of and wants to experience. And so, even though he's in the asylum, these letters provide a kind of narrative, almost like a movie, like a narrative cinema of what's going on in the rest of the world, and that is something that provides real sakau. Is that how you pronounce it? It really invigorates Vincent's spirit to know from his brother what's going on in the art world, and just sharing ideas and thoughts about art and artists. And this really nourishes Van Gogh. This really sustains him. You can imagine if Theo was a banker or a accountant or a YouTuber or something, um, there would be none of that nourishment that he needed coming in. And it's hard to imagine if Vincent van Gogh was a pot plant, that pot plant would get enough sun and water and nourishment in general. So Theo played a really important part in keeping Van Gogh kind of on the road that he needed to be on. And it wasn't a very easy road to be on either. What does Yvonne say? Yeah, that's it. I don't know if you know that Vincent at one point even started eating his paint, at a very low point. I think we've already covered that in a fairly recent letter. Anyway, let's continue. So he says, number two is a group of workmen on their way to the factory. By the way, if you want to follow, this is the letter. Number two is a group of workmen on their way to the factory, marching two abreast through heaps of slag and coal, wooden props, black chunks threatening the sky. Number three, La Hershey's. She stands talking to a young boy before going down into the mine. They're dressed in the same way, but she's all woman. Above their heads, a big beam cuts off part of the sky against which they're delineated. So, something else just to mention, Theo doesn't just write a letter back and say, you know what, you should eat meat and don't do too much of this. And it's not like matter of fact. It's very well executed, and there's also room for kind of the personal touch. I mean, I think it's very hard to ignore the fact that just how personal Vincent's letters are to Theo and how personal Theo's letters are to Vincent, that they are both real human beings, aren't they? But I mean, even Theo has time in these letters. Bear in mind, he's recently gotten married, his wife's pregnant, he's got a job, he's got lots of things going on. He's got time to write a letter to his brother and to actually be descriptive about it. He's not just saying, well, I saw this picture, it really moved me. I wish I could tell you more about it, but I don't have time. He actually takes the time to describe it, to paint the picture with words, because he knows that his brother really needs that and can feel that and see that and can appreciate that. So he says, think about just how visually descriptive this is, to say, she stands talking. I mean, close your eyes when I read this. She stands talking to a young boy before going down into the mine. They are dressed in the same way, but she is all woman. Above their heads, a big beam cuts off part of the sky against which they are delineated. And this too, though it may be neither impressionistic nor modern painting, is very good for all that. So you kind of get this stark sense of a mother and son, their figures standing out against the sky. And it's all about them going down into a mine, but their bodies themselves almost look dark like coal. It's a very black and white, very stark portrait. Then he says there's also a life-size puddler in bronze, which looks like some figure by Malay, also very good. Jo is quite well. She's now somewhere in the middle of her pregnancy. So far, all goes well. She's big, which hinders her a little, but apart from a fit of nausea now and then, there's nothing the matter with her. Now, one also wonders about Jo's health, because bear in mind, Theo would die just 6 months after Vincent, and make no mistake, right now Theo also has syphilis. He's got the same thing going on with him. So if anything, Theo understands what Vincent's going through because he's going through it himself. So when Theo says to Vincent, you need to take it easy. You need to eat meat. Another way of saying that is probably, I ate meat, I felt better. I didn't do that, I felt better. You do that, you'll feel better as well. Um, I'm eating properly now that I'm married. You need to try and find a way to eat properly as well. Um, the other thing that's quite incredible with Theo is, even though he's married, even though he's pregnant, even though his wife has been at times unwell, and even though he's at times been unwell, he has the um, capacity, the space in his heart to think about his brother in such a kind of considerate way. So, a big part of Van Gogh's legacy, and Van Gogh's gift to us is Theo. Theo played a big part in um, allowing all of this to happen in a way. All things pink and possible. Good to see you here. Lisa, good to see you. I'm just going to quickly turn off that alarm. Sorry about that. Um, I think that's true. He could only eat what they gave him, but I think um, he can also eat more or less. He can also skip meals. I wouldn't be surprised. I seriously wouldn't be surprised if the food that he's getting, as subpar as it is still better than how he was feeding himself as an artist. Because I don't know if you remember, at one point he told his brother that he'd lost so many teeth, like some of his teeth were rotten and other teeth he'd lost. And then he said something like, I don't know if you remember, he said, I've only had 6 warm meals in the last 6 months, or something like that. And he said it something like this. He said, every day I have a cup of coffee, I smoke my cigar, and I occasionally eat some bread. I don't know if you remember that. And you can imagine it's pretty easy to improve on a diet like that, right? So I do think his brother's basically just saying, dude, try and just settle down and eat your meals, kind of thing. And and when there is meat, eat meat. You can't tell me that at the asylum they never offered any meat. I'm pretty sure once or twice a meet, once or twice a week they did. Okay. So let's continue. Mel says, "I remember that." Chelsea says, "I remember as well." Okay. Um, then he says, apart from a fit of nausea now and then, there's nothing the matter with her. Now, I can't help applying the sort of true crime tool of intertextuality into this little part of the narrative. And what I mean is, Van Gogh is in this asylum and he's kind of okay, and then he has some kind of attack. Sometimes he calls it an attack, sometimes he calls it an episode, and then he's okay again. And it just seems like, you know he's he sort of putters along, he does whatever he's doing, and then it seems that randomly, unexpectedly, he has an attack, an episode, almost like an epileptic, and then he recovers and he continues, and this sort of pattern repeats itself. And you might look at that and go, what on earth is going on? Was he suffering from mental illness? Did he have mania? Did he have depression? Did he have this? Did he have that? On the other side, in Paris, Joe is pregnant, And every now and then she's suffering from a fit of nausea. Now, does that mean she has mania, that she's got depression, that she's got some kind of illness? No, it means she's got a perfectly normal something that is affecting her health, and then it goes away again, and then again the thing comes back and affects her health. And look at the words that he uses: a fit of nausea, right? And with a fit of nausea, sometimes you've got to stop what you're doing. Sometimes you can even pass out, if it's bad enough. In a way, Van Gogh is having the same thing. He's having fits, right, that are taking place. Now, think about someone who's pregnant who has fits of nausea. That's completely a normal part of that whole thing. It's a completely normal, predictable thing. Why is this happening? Because your body's resources are under strain. Your body's energy levels are not constant, or unstable, for the lack of a better word. And so I want to compare someone who's pregnant to someone who's got a serious bacterial infection. Um, it's likely, in the same way that if you're pregnant, you're going to have moments of weakness and then you can recover from them. The same with syphilis or a very serious bacterial infection. You're also going to have moments of weakness and then you'll feel better again. But to try and take that and say that is a sign of insanity or some kind of, I don't know, I've heard so many different, um, what do you call it, diagnoses. I just think it's syphilis. It's just a neurosyphilis. And it's just completely normal, but it certainly plays havoc with your physical and mental health, this kind of thing, right? Do you see how it's kind of intuitive? It's not like this big unknown and unknowable thing. I mean, I might be being too simplistic and it might be too reductionist, but I might not be. Anyway, he goes on to say, Joe's no longer uneasy now and has no fears. And again, think about the analogy to Van Gogh. Joe is scared that she's going to lose the baby. Joe is worried about her health. Joe's worried that her health could affect the life of the child. Van Gogh, in a way, is feeling similar. He's wondering, can I still paint? Will I still be able to function? And a lot of what makes all of this worse is just being afraid. So not having certainty about what's going on. I mean, when if I can indulge you guys just for a moment, when I had what I think was the result of drinking contaminated water, in the beginning, I didn't know what it was. I just knew I felt extremely weak and tired. Um, with that comes quite a lot of anxiety. It's like, what is going on with me? Like how serious is this? Is it going to get worse? And that fear, in a way, makes everything a lot worse. That uncertainty. Think about Van Gogh had that fear and uncertainty for about a year, where he didn't know if he was going to come out the other side, right? Excuse me. Anyway, it goes on to say, I hope you're getting better and that you are not feeling too unhappy. We often speak and think of you. That's quite a kind, um, undramatic way of saying we hope you're okay. Chin up, old sport, right? We hope that you're not feeling too unhappy. He's not saying we hope that you are not feeling unhappy. He's saying we hope you're not feeling too unhappy. In other words, they know he's not very happy. And they're basically just saying, we're thinking of you. We're trying to offer some solutions. Try and you know eat properly and try and do practical things to improve your situation. We hope you're not feeling too unhappy. You really do get a sense that they are with him in spirit, and that have to be quite encouraging. Kindest regards from Joe and a cordial handshake. Okay, so next letter, 19th September. It's interesting that he doesn't write back to his brother immediately. You kind of get the feeling that he wants to, he's going to need time to write this kind of encyclopedic response. And you remember how long that last letter was? It took hours to just read it. Anyway, so this is his letter to his sister. My dear sister, in the interval since my last letter, I've tried more than once to write a letter to you and mother. I therefore thank you very much for the second kind letter you wrote me. I think both you and mother did the right thing to leave Bradar after Cor went away. Bear in mind, their younger brother Cor, there are three Van Gogh brothers. Vincent's the eldest. Vincent actually had an older brother as well who died during childbirth. Um, and then Theo, and then Cor is the youngest, and Cor is currently on his way to South Africa. He's probably still on a boat. It is certain that we ought not to let grief accumulate in our heart like water in a turbid pool. It is true that I have a profound feeling at times that my mind is turbid indeed. Now, again, it's not that Van Gogh is incapable of communicating, I'm having a tough time, or this is what I'm thinking, or this is what I'm feeling. And this is why I say, if you believe Van Gogh took his own life, why would he not communicate that he was not feeling very happy? Because he's a super duper letter writer. He doesn't hold back. If his art is full of intensity and full of feeling, and it's called expressionism for a reason. If he's an expressionist painter and he's an expressionist writer, why does he hold back on the thing that he's feeling the most? I hate my life. I'm feeling very upset about this, but there's none of that in the last weeks of his life, right? And so here he says, I have a profound feeling at times that my mind is turbid indeed. Now, imagine if he died the day after he wrote this. Just imagine that. Like the day after he wrote this letter, they find him in his cell and he's died. Wouldn't you say, wow, wasn't he trying to say something with those words, right? And the same then applies in at the end of July 1890. Why is there nothing in his letters that's any symptom of, well, I'm not feeling so good? Instead, he put in one of the biggest orders for art materials from his brother. I mean, that's showing what his intentions are. And the art that he'd ordered was for himself and painter friend that stayed next door to him. That shows what he was thinking of and what he was planning to do, right? Then he says, for persons who are active and in good health, however, it is certainly necessary to do what you have done. As I told mother in my letter, so what he's basically saying is, I support the fact that you've left and gone somewhere else. And of course, he's thinking the same thing. Like, I also want to go somewhere else, right? I also don't want to be here anymore. He goes on to say, as I told mother in my letter, I shall send her a picture, say within a month or so, and there will be one for you too. These last weeks, I've also painted some pictures for myself. I don't especially like to see my own pictures in my bedroom, which is why I copied one picture by Delacroix and some others by Mallet. The Delacroix is a Pieta, that is to say, the dead Christ with the Mater Dolorosa. It's interesting that that is what is preoccupying him, the dead Christ. And I don't know if you remember, Gauguin often thought of, I don't know if, is there anyone here that's read my book, The Murder of Vincent van Gogh? Gauguin often thought of Vincent as a sort of martyr figure. You got the feeling that Gauguin understood Vincent as a kind of guy who likes to suffer and who likes to be seen as a kind of martyr for art. And I mean, that's one interpretation, which is hard to argue with, but that's not, I think, the real Van Gogh. That's just a certain perspective into him. And then he also painted a ginger Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane, I believe. And some people speculated that that was his way of painting Vincent. You guys remember that? And so when he says, let's just go down to that. When he talks about the dead Christ with Marta Dolorosa, it's hard to imagine he's in a way not thinking about himself. Look at this figure. He's got sort of ginger hair. There's some yellow in the picture. This figure's got a lot of yellow on him as well. And then there's a sort of a motherly figure behind him. And he has this picture in his room, and this is the picture he's mentioning to his sister and I guess mother. And it's hard to imagine if if this picture doesn't resonate so much with him. um, why is he bringing it up, and also why does he have it in his room? And one can't help but think that he is, in a way, imagining himself to be this figure, this dying Christ, right? And look at the colors in this picture: yellow and blue, the same colors in Starry Night. Interesting. He says the exhausted corpse lies on the ground in the entrance of the cave, the hands held before it on the left side and the woman behind it. You kind of get the idea that when he paints that, in a way, he's trying to understand his own situation. In a way, he's connecting to his own situation. Think about it. He's in this asylum. He's all alone. No one understands him. He's kind of abandoned. And in a way, I think he feels like he's done so much for people. He's painted them, he's listened to them, he's watched them, he's trying to feel the human condition, right? And in one sense, it can seem really pathetic. This nondescript non-entity, this poor guy who's not got any money, who's trying to connect to the human condition. You might sit there, especially if you're Dr. Peyron, and go, wow, delusions of grandeur. Like, are you really telling me that you can connect to the human condition and it means anything? I mean, you're a nothing. You cuckoo, it really doesn't mean anything. And what's the other side to that? You have this guy who's not like this is, I mean, in a way, he did come from a privileged family, but you kind of have this person who gets his feet dirty and his hands dirty, and he lives amongst I mean, at this point, he's living literally amongst madmen. It's not so different to when he was in the Borinage and he lived amongst miners, and he wanted to be dirty, and he wanted to have no money, and he wanted that experience, right? He wanted that intense feeling of being alive. And that same intense feeling he wants to put into his art. And that is one reason why I think Van Gogh is such a incredible spirit, just as a person, but also important artist, because that thing that he's trying to do, connect to the human experience, I think he ends up doing that. I think Starry Night is a sort of typical example of that, but a lot of the other things he paints, the cypresses, the wheat fields, trying to think what else, the fields under storm clouds, a lot of that does resonate. Just the sort of turbulence over some of those olive orchards in outside Sagamé. It is no longer painting a tree; he's painting symbols of resilience and eternity. Is painting about the ability of the human mind to either what's the word, um, almost contain and cognitively solve the problem of being alive, the human, the problem of existence, or it is to just be caught up in um, the tumultuous violence of it all, the electricity of life. Or another way of looking at it is how he transcends the difficulty of his own experience, and instead he sees the whole world coming alive, like almost like the Matrix but through color. All of that is different code for someone who does seem to be connecting to the human experience. And if you need somebody to connect to the human experience, you need someone intelligent, sensitive, and someone who does it kind of as a job, because you can't just connect one day and then go away. um, I think it's also a reason why I feel I identify with Van Gogh, because I feel like through certain crimes, not certain crimes, every crime that I deal with, I try and connect that crime to the human experience, my experience, your experience, but also society, and then try and turn that into something that edifies us. You're not just voyeuristically being shocked, and it's not like this cheap um, sort of flash in the pan thing. I see some creators out there who jump from one shock story to the next, just on and on and on. Are you going to do that forever? Like, wow, this is so shocking. Look how shocking that is. Is that going to be the meat and potatoes of how you deal with this thing in the world? Or can you take one story, and out of that story you distill something that can actually nourish you, and you say, what do we take out of this that can give life, and that can give hope, and that can give light, like it can illuminate the path so that you don't make the same mistake. And so it's in the same way, kind of a sense of connecting to the human predicament through a story like that. And I find you've succeeded when you suddenly, wherever you are in the story, you suddenly feel a surge of sympathy, even, and or compassion for someone that is loathed and even hated by pretty much everyone. Someone like Jodi Arias, it's very hard to think of her without really disliking her. But it's once you reach that point where you suddenly feel almost sympathy for her, that you realize you have connected to the human experience. And the same applies to all of these other perpetrators. When you tap into that aspect, you've connected your own experience with theirs in a way, or theirs with yours. And now you can actually take something out of that where you say, wow, this could happen to me, or this could happen to someone that I know, or this could happen if you don't read the tea leaves, right? And, in a time where so much is fake news and disconnected from the human experience, things are just random fragments. Somebody who is able to put their lives aside and say, I want to connect to the human experience here, I think it's quite valuable. I think it's quite important to say, I'm connecting to the human experience, and this is what I see, and shouldn't we do something? Like, this is where it's going. Um, what do you guys think about that? It's quite a deeply cerebral subject. Are you guys following me with how I'm trying to present it, or does it sound like I'm just waffling? Chelsea says, I saw the original in Rome. Yvonne says, regardless of all Vincent's efforts to reject the old world faith, deep down it is a foundational part of his identity. Yeah, he does have a deep spirituality about him. Um, so just give me some feedback. What I've just shared there, do you follow the wavelength that I've been on, or is it like I didn't quite understand what you were saying? Okay. Thanks, Yvonne. Okay, so then he says, it is in the evening after a thunderstorm. Just listen to these words. It is in the evening after a thunderstorm, and that forlorn figure in blue clothes and loose clothes are agitated by the wind. He's talking about this, saying, this is in the evening after a thunderstorm. And then he says, that forlorn figure in blue clothes, the loose clothes are agitated by the wind, is sharply outlined against a sky in which violet clouds with golden edges are floating. She too stretches out her empty arms before her in a large gesture of despair, and one sees the good sturdy hands of a working woman. Now, you can almost see in these hands the hands of the potato eaters. It's like looking at the human hand. And then he goes on to say, the shape of the figure with its streaming clothes is nearly as broad as it is high, and the face of the dead man is in the shadow. But the pale head of the woman stands out clearly against the cloud, a contrast which causes those two heads to seem like one somber hued flower and one pale flower, arranged in such a way as mutually to intensify the effect. I can't help reading these words and looking at this picture, and in a way thinking about Theo with Vincent when Vincent died. I can't help seeing an analogy in that. Obviously, Theo is his brother, but his brother was tending to um, his older brother in almost a maternal way, you know. So in a weird way, there's a little bit of a prediction in that particular picture, because it is a dead person with someone sort of looking over him. He says, I do not know what had become of this picture, but at the very time I was busy working on it, I happened to read an article by Pierre Loti, author of My Brother Eves, Fisherman of Iceland, and of Madame Chrysantheme. An article he wrote about Carmen Silva. You have read her poems, if my memory doesn't deceive me. She is a queen. Is she the queen of Hungary or some other country? That I do not know. And Loti, when describing her boudoir, or rather her studio in which she writes and applies herself to the art of painting, says that he saw the canvas of Delacroix in question and that it made a deep impression on him. When speaking of Carmen Silva, he makes his readers feel that her personality is even more interesting than her words, though she says things like these: a woman without a child is like a bell without a clapper. Perhaps the sound of the bronze is very fine, but as a matter of fact, it does one good to think that such a painting should be in such hands, and it may be something of a consolation to the painters to be able to imagine that there really are souls who have a feeling for pictures, but there are relatively few of them. I thought fit to send you a sketch of it in order to give you an idea of what Delacroix is. Please understand fully that this little copy hasn't the slightest value, whatever the point of view. Notwithstanding which you may see from it that Delacroix does not draw the features of a Marta della Rosa after the manner of the Roman statues, but there it is in the greyish-white countenance, the lost, vague look of a person exhausted by anxiety and weeping and waking, rather in the manner of Germany Lascaux. It is a very good and fortunate thing, as I see it, that you are not quite enthusiastic about the masterly book by de Goncourt. All the better that you should prefer Tolstoy, you who read books in the first place, to draw from them the energy to act. I tell you, you are 1,000 times in the right. But I, who read books to find the artist who wrote them, should I, for my part, be in the wrong if I like the French novelist so much? The other day I finished a portrait of a woman upward of 40 years old, an insignificant woman. The withered face is tired, pockmarked, a sunburned, olive colored complexion, black hair, a faded black dress relieved by a geranium of a delicate pink, and the background in a neutral tone between pink and green. Must as portraits go, that's not a bad portrait. It's certainly, I think, a much better portrait than the one he did of Dr. Gachet. Look how well he executes the nose. I mean, compare the quality of this portrait to this one. Which would you say is a better execution? Which one captures the eyes, nose, mouth better? Then he says, for I often paint things like that as insignificant and as dramatic as a dusty blade of grass by the roadside, and consequently it seems to me that it is only right that I should have a boundless admiration for de Goncourt, that's Emile Zola, Flaubert, Maupassant, Huysmans. As for you, don't hurry and go on courageously with your Russians. I think is talking about, yeah, Russian authors. Have you already read My Religion by Tolstoy? It is said to be very practical and really useful. So dive into the very depths of it, seeing that you like this. So here in his letter to his sister, is giving reading advice. Read this book, read that book. I really enjoyed this. You might like that. I painted two pictures of myself lately, one of which is rather the true character, I think. Although in Holland they would probably scoff at the ideas about portrait painting that are germinating here. Did you see the self portrait by the painter Guillaumin at Theo's and the portrait of a young woman by the same? They give an idea of what painters are looking for. When Guillaumin exhibited his self portrait, public and artists were greatly amused by it, and yet it is one of those rare things capable of holding their own beside the old Dutch masters, even Rembrandt and Hals, that's Frans Hals. I always think photographs abominable. So that is his. Remember, all of this is taking place against the recent technology. Photography has just come online, and so portrait artists have got to differentiate their work from photographs. And so it's not surprising that he doesn't like anything to do with photographs. He says, I don't like to have them around, particularly not those of persons I know and love. Should we have a look for a Gulami portrait? Let's see if we can find one. Um, I can't find a portrait, but this is a landscape. Um, okay, maybe this is a better version of it. Quite like it. That could be Auver's as well. See if I can find Gulami portrait. So think about, I don't know why I can't. Think about this picture, right? And this one. Because I mean, he's just mentioned this one, and then see if I can put them side by side. Um, was he not thinking of this picture when he painted that one? It's a different person, but is he not reminded of this one? Possibly. He does say a portrait of a woman upwards of 40 years old, the withered face is tired and pockmarked. Anyway, then he talks about Guillaumine's portraits. And then he says, in the same way, the children in Mauve's family will always see him in the portrait masker painted so well of him. I just received a letter from Theo. So he's received the letter, he's read the letter, and then he says, Theo replies to what I told him about my wish to return to the north for some time. So it's quite clear that he's not happy in the asylum anymore. Like he's done, kind of thing. And it's going to be 6 long months before he actually leaves. So can you imagine that? Imagine staying at a hotel, or I don't know what's similar to this. Let's say staying at a hotel, and you're saying I really don't like this hotel, but you're going to stay at that hotel for another 6 months. Most people wouldn't like that very much. It is rather improbable that this will happen while you write about that, but it is impossible to say when, as this depends on what opportunities present themselves for going to live with some artist or other. So he didn't end up going to live with some artist, but he did go to live near a doctor who liked art, right? But seeing that we know a good many of them and that it is often to their mutual advantage for two artists to live together, it won't take long. Now, what's quite interesting here is it's hard to miss the fact that Vincent and Gauguin stayed together for 2 months. And at the end of that, Vincent lost his ear, he lost his house, he got kicked out of the town, and he came very close to losing his life. Like he bled so much from losing his ear that his bed was just covered in blood, and he was just lying there, and people thought that he had actually died, right? And what is the kind of basic setup there? Two artists working together and two artists living together. Yeah, he's talking about the same thing. To have two artists to live together. And the reason I'm just bringing it up is the problem here Vincent in a basic way? Because I think Vincent was at fault in certain ways, and I think Gauguin was at fault in certain ways. But in a very basic way, is the person at fault here Vincent? Because if it is, then why is he doing this all over again? In other words, if Vincent got himself into such a terrible state that he cut off his own ear, I don't know if I'm making a very good argument here, because the flip side of it is, if someone else did it to him, is it a good idea to be in that situation all over again? I don't know. But it's quite interesting that the lesson he learns is that he wants to be in that situation again. He wants to live with another artist. How does that reflect on what likely really happened in the yellow house. Just something interesting to think about. Then he says, in conclusion, I say to you, see you soon, and I thank you very much for your letters. Well, I don't know if he is going to. You can't help but think that Vincent is trying to pave the way for himself to go north, that he's writing to his sister, hoping that his sister might write to his brother and maybe say to Theo, you know what, Vincent said, see you soon. I don't know if Vincent thinks he's coming here. It's quite a weird thing to say, see you soon. He's not at the end of the day. He says, I don't know yet which canvases I'm going to send you and mother, probably a field of wheat and an orchard of olive trees, together with that copy of the Delacroix. It is splendid weather outside, but for a long time, 2 months to be exact, I've not left my room and I don't know why. That's really weird, isn't it? He's saying, I'm just staying in my room. I don't know why. I don't know why I'm not going out. And he says, what I need is courage, and this often fails me. So you kind of get a sense that he's feeling depressed and maybe overwhelmed. But I mean, again, the point to emphasize here is, and let me ask this as a question, when Vincent is not happy, when Vincent is struggling, when Vincent is not in a good place, is he able to communicate that? Does he communicate that? Has he communicated that? I mean, just look at these lines here. It's splendid weather outside, but I've not left my room. I don't know why. I need courage, but this often fails me. It is also a fact that since my disease, when I'm in the fields, I'm overwhelmed by feelings of loneliness to such a horrible extent that I shy away from going out. So you almost get a sense that perhaps he's so depressed at this point. And who wouldn't be? Like, if someone put you in an asylum surrounded by mad people and you can't talk to them about your world and your interest, you're surrounded by people, but you can't actually talk to them. And you are far from home, you're far from your people. Wouldn't you feel not only lonely, but overwhelmed by loneliness? Like, think about an asylum being very much like a prison, like a real prison. Has anyone seen that documentary on Netflix of Vicky White, where they describe what it's like in that prison? Just the way you can't get any sleep because people are screaming, and then there's this constant people who are coming off drugs, and this constant people. How can I put it? Someone is always agitated. Um, there's always someone who's basically unhinged or unsettled or unstable. And so, how can you be calm and stable when there's this cacophony going on around you? And doesn't that, like, if you're lonely to begin with, I mean, if you're in a prison like that and you're lonely to begin with, all of that's going to make it so much more of a nightmare, isn't it? So I do recommend, if you've got Netflix, watch the something about something love story, and they talk about the prison environment. There's also some very interesting um, calls where you get a real sense of just how much Vicky White was um, caught up in a fantasy, caught up in uh, uh, I don't know, an infatuation, a love affair, for the lack of a better word, but basically very much caught up in. She was someone who always did something for someone else, and you got the feeling that for once she was going to indulge in what she wanted, and she'd been unlucky in love quite a few times. But you can also see how she was terrified of being in a prison herself, which she would have ended up being in. Jody says, I watched it. So you know what I'm talking about, like just how they describe the horrific sounds and the experience of being locked inside a situation like that. And Vincent's been there for 2 months and he can't muster the wherewithal to get out, right? Yeah, that's right. So Mel, you also saw it, right? Then he says, but this will change all the same as time goes on. Only when I stand painting before my easel do I feel somewhat alive. So you can take from that that kind of at the moment is feeling somewhat dead. And I think the painting of the dead Christ is very symbolic. Did think about what we're talking about here. You know, he's stuck in his room. You know, he could go out, but he doesn't go out. Um, his brother has just sent him a letter talking about your dark thoughts. Where's that? He says, why do you stay locked up and don't go out and get some fresh air? But where does he mention the dark thoughts? There, those dark thoughts will vanish, right? So his brother even talks about his dark thoughts. He's talking about certain, and then, but what does he paint when he's going through all of that? He paints the dead Christ. What does he paint in the summer of 1890 going into late July? Does he paint anything like this? Does he paint anything nearly like this? No. Does he write about this sort of thing? Does he say, I can't go out, I'm feeling over? I mean, he says here, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Where is it? I'm just looking for the word overwhelmed. Um, there it is. Let's put it in full screen. There it is. It says, overwhelmed by a feeling of loneliness. And he's so overwhelmed that he can't even go outside. And it's so horrible. And he says, I shy away from going out. And so, what does this tell you? It tells you that when he's overwhelmed, when he's at a really low point, he's dysfunctional. He can't paint and he can't go out and he feels afraid and he feels alone. Is that what's going on in the last 70 days of his life? Does he not go out? Does he feel lonely? I mean, he's staying with an innkeeper and their family, and he eats like in a restaurant full of other people. And he one day is painting Marguerite Gachet, then he's painting Dr. Gachet, then he meets Dr. Gachet's son, then he goes and paints in the field, and Rene Secretan is there, and so on and so on and so on. And then the next day goes and visits Theo, and then Theo comes to visit them. It's totally different. Am I making a good point? Like, are you following what I'm saying? He says, but this will change as the time goes on. Only when I stand painting before my easel do I feel somewhat alive. As I say, that is another way of saying I'm not feeling very alive. I feel like I'm dying. Never mind, that is going to change too. For now, my health is so good that I suppose the physical part of me will gain the victory. And yeah, he says it again. See you soon. Yours, Vincent. So can you see the feeling I get from him is I don't want to be here anymore. Like I don't feel like going out. I've painted everything. I don't want to be here. Like I don't want to go out and come back to this. What I want, what I need, what I have to have is to not be here. I want to go north. I want to be with Theo. I don't want to be here anymore. That's kind of what's eating at him. Let's see if we can do maybe one more letter. Oh, it's a long one. Oh, another one. Okay. Okay, so this is the letter he writes to back to Theo. What do you guys think? Should I keep going? It's an hour and a half. I want to try and get to mid-October by around about next week this time. Um, I think I'm going to do one more letter. What do you guys say? The thing is, I don't think he could have just left the asylum. Like if he had said, "I want to leave the asylum right now," I don't think he could have. The doctor had to authorize that, and he wasn't in the right place physically or mentally for that to happen, right? Like if Vincent had said, "I'm leaving," he wouldn't be allowed to leave. And if you disagree with that or you think that that's misinformed, well, when he did want to leave, the doctor had to give permission. In other words, when he eventually left, the doctor basically gave his blessing. That's how he ended up leaving, right? Okay, let's go through this last letter. My dear Theo, many thanks for your letter. It gives me very great pleasure that you on your side had already also thought of old Pissarro. You will see that there are better odds there other than elsewhere. Meanwhile, business is business, and you ask me to answer you categorically, and you are right. If I would consent to go into a home in Paris in case of an immediate departure for this winter, I answer yes to that with the same calm and for the same reasons I had when I came to this place, even if this home in Paris should be a makeshift arrangement, which might easily be the case, for the opportunities to work are not bad here, and work is my only distraction. I don't know if that's answering the question quite in the terms that Theo raised them. Theo said, "Will you go to an asylum or sanatorium if it's necessary?" Anyway, but having said that, please note that in my letter I gave a very serious reason as a motive for wishing to make a change, and I insist on repeating it. I'm astonished that with the modern ideas that I have, and being so ardent an admirer of Zola and de Goncourt, and caring for things of art as I do, that I have attacks such as a superstitious man might have, and that I get perverted and frightful ideas about religion, such as never came into my head in the North. So it seems like he is literally having hallucinations, right? On the supposition that I am very sensitive to surroundings, the already prolonged stay in these sour old cloisters, the old hospital and the house here would be enough in itself to explain these attacks. Saying, I'm very sensitive to surroundings, okay. Then, even as a last resort, it might be necessary for the moment to go into a private asylum instead. So, there he acknowledges I might need to do that. Nevertheless, to avoid doing or having the appearance of doing anything rash, I declare, after having thus warned you of what I might wish at a given moment, that is to go away, I assure you that I feel calm and confident enough to wait here another length of time to see if a new attack materializes this winter. So he's saying, you know what, I'm also prepared to just wait here and see what is going on with me, and then let's make a decision. He says, but then if I write you, I want to get out of here, you should not hesitate and arrange things beforehand, for you would know then that I had a serious reason, or even several, for going into a home not run, as this one is, by nuns, however excellent they may be. Now, if by some arrangement or other, sooner or later, I should make a move, just think how brilliantly, he's making his case, almost like a lawyer. He's saying, you know what, this is how we need to broker this situation. It's all very well reasoned. So, once again, if there's any exhibit, any demonstration, any sign that Van Gogh is sensible, well, it's through his own letters. And that's why I'm trying to show, while he's in the asylum, it's not like he is mad. He has episodes of something. And I wouldn't even call those episodes insanity. I would say they are episodes of almost like unconsciousness, or whatever you call it when you have epilepsy. It's not like you're consciously biting your tongue or anything, right? And so when he has these episodes, it's really episodes of unconsciousness, or episodes of um, what would you say is a good way of describing it? Maybe just neurosyphilis, or mental. Um, it's not even mental disorder, because that's not what it is. It's um, just want to look for the term in neurosyphilis, what they call it. Is it seizures? Can you say that a seizure is a disorder? I wouldn't say that. Okay, let's have a quick look at this. Asymptomatic meningeal syphilis. Um, Individuals with meningeal syphilis can have headaches, stiff neck, nausea. Remember, I compared it to being pregnant, vomiting. There can also be a loss of vision or hearing. So he even talks about hearing things. Then meningovascular syphilis, um, general paresis, mood changes, and then tabes dorsalis, loss of sense of vibration, poor gait, impaired balance. I don't know if it's quite that bad. Okay, that's not quite what I'm looking for. Symptoms of neurosyphilis. Suppose it depends on how bad it is. Vision loss. You can imagine this is quite frightening. Loss of reflexes, poor gait, impaired balance. Just want to get a different. Is there a Mayo Clinic? Because that one might give a fairly good one. Let's just have a look at. Nausea, vomiting, stiff neck, headache, loss of hearing or vision. So, if you can't see or hear, you can imagine, and it says here 10 to 12% can have strokes, right? So it's possible that when Van Gogh was having a really serious attack, it felt like a stroke. It's like a loss of consciousness. Um, so all of this is, I think, almost similar to a seizure. It's almost like it's like a loss of connection to your senses, your ability, your cognitive capacities, right? So it's a good point. Wow, guys, it is Eiston's birthday. Happy birthday. Hope you're having a lovely day. Really glad to see you here. Um, Iceland's one of the few mods that I've met in person, and really was nice seeing you. I really, what a beautiful context to that meeting as well. Just the spectacular lighthouse and the incredible coastline of Oregon, and it was really quite a special um, experience. Definitely. I wonder if I'm going to be in Oregon again. By the way, Iceland, I've actually got a map of Oregon in my office framed. So, there's no way I'm going to forget about Oregon. Okay. Anyway, thanks a lot for joining us, Iceland. And I hope you have a wonderful day. I was actually hoping to meet Chelsea in Italy, but we weren't able to coordinate our schedule. So, a little bit unfortunate. Wow, Mel Stiller says I celebrated my birthday 2 days ago. So, happy birthday to Mel. Happy birthday. Um, and I see you've got a couple of cakes there. Okay. Aston says, I feel truly blessed. Thank you so much. Okay. I'm listening and currently cruising across the valley. Beautiful fall colors today. I hope you're going to take some photos of those so we can see them on Instagram. But really glad to see you here. Okay. Anyway, I think we've touched sufficiently on the symptoms. Then he says, again, it's so cleverly argued. He says, and so sensibly argued. He says, if by some arrangement or other, sooner or later I should make a move, then let's begin as if practically nothing was wrong, being very cautious all the same, and ready to listen to Reveille in the smallest matters. But don't let's begin by taking too formal measures straight off, as if it were a lost cause. As for eating a lot, I do, but if I were my doctor, I'd forbid it. So this is just a painting that he's done. I think the original. I must say, when I think of Saint-Remy, you do see these olive groves around there, and I'll take a couple of photos when I'm there. I don't see any advantage for myself in enormous physical strength because I'm absorbed in the idea of doing good work and wishing to be an artist, and nothing but that would be more logical. Both Mother and Will, after Cora's departure, have moved. They were absolutely right. So, he is very conscious that his mother and sister and his younger brother are on the move. They've changed where they are, and he's sort of feeling like, me too. I also need to move. I also need to be somewhere else. It is not necessary that grief gathers in our heart like water in a swamp, but it is sometimes both expensive and impossible to change. Will wrote beautifully that it is a great grief to them, Cora's departure. It is odd, just when I was making that copy of the Pieta by Delacroix, I found where that canvas has gone. Belongs to a queen of Hungary. He's talking about the original. Or of some other country thereabouts, who has written poems under the name of Carmen Silva. The article mentioning her in the picture was by Pierre Loti, and he made you feel that this Carmen Silva as a person was even more touching than what she wrote. And she wrote things like this: a childless woman is like a bell without a clapper. The sound of the bronze would perhaps be very beautiful, but no one will ever hear it. Second time he's mentioned that. I have now 7 copies out of the 10 of Millet's Travail de Champ. I can assure you that making copies interests me enormously, and it means that I shall not lose sight of the figure, even though I have no models at the moment. Besides this, this will make a studio decoration for me or someone else. I should also like to copy the sewer and the diggers. There's a photograph of the diggers after the drawing, and of the sewer at Durant's Rules, the etching by Larat. Among these same etchings is found the snow-covered field with a harrow. Then the 4 hours of the day. In the collection of wood engravings, there are some copies. So you can't help but think that Van Gogh is kind of stuck in his room and he's just ruminating, he's just imagining artworks, he's just visualizing paintings that he knows out of memory. He does seem to have a pretty incredible memory, and even a photographic memory. Karen Sanderson, hello from Wisconsin. Good to see you. Okay, let's continue. Uh, I should like to have all these, at least the etchings and the wood engravings. It is a kind of study that I need, for I want to learn, although copying may be the old system. That makes absolutely no difference to me. That makes absolutely no difference to me. I'm going to copy the Good Samaritan by Delacroix too. I've done a woman's portrait, the attendant's wife, which I think you would like. I've done a duplicate of it, which is less good than the one from life, and I'm afraid they will take the latter. I should have liked you to have it. It is pink and black. I'm sending you today my portrait of me. You must look at it for some time. You will see, I hope, that my features are much calmer, although my look is vaguer than before, it seems to me. That's, I guess, his version of sending his brother a selfie. I have another one which is an attempt when I was ill, but I think this will please you more, and I've tried to make it simple. Show it to old Pissarro when you see him. Okay, well, that's. You'll be surprised at the effect Les Travaux de Champ takes on in color. It is a very profound series of his. What I'm seeking in it and why it seems good to me to copy them, I will tell you. They are always asking why we painters they are always asking we painters to compose ourselves and be nothing but composers. So be it. But it isn't like that in music. And if some person plays Beethoven, he adds his personal interpretation. In music, and more especially in singing, the interpretation of a composer is something, and it is not a hard and fast rule that only the composer should play his own composition. Now, again, just a reminder of what we're dealing with. Van Gogh has been stuck in his room for 2 months. Guess what he's doing now? Is in his room just scratching on a piece of paper. This long letter is writing about Delacroix and Millet and quite, you know, interesting cerebral concepts about art and artists. But the reality is he's not where he wants to be, and he's not feeling like he wants to go outside. He does want to write to his brother, and he does have thoughts that he wants to communicate to his brother. But in terms of the outside world and the environment that he lives in, he doesn't really want to connect to it. He doesn't want to be involved in it. He wants to shut it out. That's the feeling you get, right? Did he ever paint a portrait of any of his fellow patients in the asylum? He painted a picture of prisoners in a circle. I don't think that's from the asylum, but that comes to mind. I mean, it's just. So he painted this, and he painted that in February 1890. But that's not. He wasn't painting the people around him. He was painting. This was inspired by a 1872 engraving by Gustave Doré of the exercise yard at Newgate Prison. So this is based on a real place. Just trying to see if I can get the original. I think it's a sculpture by this artist. Some pretty beautiful paintings, right? I'm looking for the one of the prisoners. Can't say that I can find it. Just give me a second. Um, Sculpture, prisoners. See if it comes up. Yeah, so it looks like it's based on this. Quite a accurate copy, right? If you think about that, I mean, it's very, very similar. You kind of get the feeling he had the actual drawing with him. I mean, it's almost a carbon copy. Look at that, and then look at that. Look at this guy over here, and this guy over here, and then look at that. Look at this guy here, and this guy here. So, to answer your question, not really. I mean, he did paint some of the people who worked there, right? I don't think he painted fellow patients so much. They probably weren't very calm or stable, and they probably didn't sit in the same space. Oh, crap. Sorry, can you guys not see? Sorry about that. Okay, let's go back. So can you see that? And then that's what he painted. So now look at this figure here, and look at that figure. And now look at the figure next to him, and look at that figure. Let me do it like this. Sorry about that. I was preoccupied looking at it myself. Can you see it's a very exact copy of it, which makes you think he had this with him. He didn't paint this from memory. He painted this from sight. Look at these three officers over here. In other words, this is not from inside the asylum. This is just something that resonated with him. Let's look at the third person over here. 1, 2, 3. Right? Okay. Anyway, again, sorry about not showing you guys the thing to begin with. Okay, so he says, I'm mostly because I'm ill at present. I'm trying to do something to console myself for my own pleasure. I'm trying to do something just to feel better about what's going on. I put the black and white by Delacroix or Malay or something made after them in front of me as a subject. And then I improvise color on it, not, you understand, altogether by myself, but searching for memory. So he's almost like Sherlock Holmes. He's going through the palace of his mind and finding paintings that'll help him escape where he is and just give him some comfort and encouragement because he's feeling so overwhelmed and unhappy, right? Then he says, what does he say? Then he says, but the memory, the vague constants of colors, which are at least right in feeling, that is my own interpretation. Many people do not copy, many others do. I started on it accidentally and find that it teaches me, and above all, it sometimes consoles me. They're saying copying the work of other artists gives him a sense of consolement. Is that a word? I think what's happening when he does that is he feels secure. He feels almost like in a place of control. He's within um, the mind in a way. You know, if he is painting within the lines in a way, or within the concepts of other artists, then he is within a certain construct which keeps him safe. Um, my brother is another artist who did that a lot as a young artist. He painted, he copied Rembrandt and my great grandfather, and so you know one way to learn the craft of art is to copy other artists. The important thing is that you then continue developing your own style, right? Um, you know, I think a lot of that is true with young people, tennis players, swimmers, athletes. They copy, they model themselves on someone, and then they hopefully take it further. Um, Even true crime people, you know, you read the books of detectives, of experts. Are you able to add to the canon, right? Are you able to add something? He goes on to say, and then my brush goes between my fingers as a bow would on the violin, and absolutely for my own pleasure. Now, I remember in the documentary, I think it's called Painted with Words, acted by Benedict Cumberbatch. He narrates these words. In fact, that entire documentary, when the actor playing Van Gogh talks, every single word comes from his letters, and this is a particularly um, memorable one. I mean, look how poetic and beautiful that is. He says, let me just read it again. And then my brush goes between my fingers as a bow would on the violin, and absolutely for my own pleasure. He's just saying how it's become so natural. The paintbrush between his fingers is has become almost part of him, and he feels secure. He feels safe. He feels like the man he was always supposed to be, the person he's always supposed to be, when he's got the paintbrush in his hand, and what a place to be. You know, he's sort of feeling a sense of thrill and ecstasy that he has at last learned to execute the way that he wants to. And I think we've all felt that in different ways. Um, I've felt it sometimes in writing. You just write absolutely effortlessly. What you're trying to say just pours out of you, and you just can't even keep up with what you're trying to say. Sometimes you're training, you know, you're running or something, and what started off as a struggle, suddenly you're just in a state of flow. Um, and you know, when you do something enough, suddenly it just becomes automatic. And if, especially if it's something that you love doing, what is happening? You're connecting in a way to the spirit of what you're doing. You're not concentrating so much on what you're doing. You're just letting it flow, right? Um, Yvonne says that's the beauty of artistry. Robbie Robin, you're really late. You're really late. So he is getting, that's a little bit of joy he's experiencing, is feeling that after all of these many paintings that he's painted, he's starting to feel that it is becoming natural, almost innate, that he's got this sort of natural um, knowledge. It kind of feels intrinsic. Okay, it's feeling very satisfying to him. Okay, let's continue. Then he says, today I tried the woman shearing sheep in a range going from lilac to yellow. Okay, that's a pretty ugly picture. So, he's just said something beautiful, but now he's ruined it with this execution. What do you guys think? Do you like that picture? And then he says, there are little canvases of about size 5. I thank you very much for the package of canvas and paints. In return, I'm sending you with a portrait the following canvases: Moonrise, Study of Fields. That's quite nice. And you really do get these red poppies all over the south of France, including growing on the railway tracks. I don't know, Chelsea, did you see red poppies in Rome and Italy? Study of olives, study of the night. That's what he's calling Starry Night, study of the night. Imagine if it was still called study of the night. Then the mountain and field of green wheat. Also quite a nice picture in the original color. Olives, that's also the original of that's also quite nice. Entrance to a quarry. He says the first 4 canvases are studies without the effect of a hole that the others have. I like very much the entrance to a quarry, which I was doing when I felt this attack coming on. So, he wasn't doing anything in particular, anything strenuous. He was just painting a picture, and then he says he felt this attack coming on. And then he says, because to my taste, the somber greens go well with the ochre tones. There's something sad in it, which is healthy. And that is why it does not bore me. And you kind of get the feeling he is kind of bored with being where he is. Oh, that's great to hear. Tell me what you're thinking about the book so far. We are talking about the murder of Vincent van Gogh, right? Have you learned anything? Did anything surprise you? Has it been moving so far? Have you felt transported into France and into this whole story? Oh, that's good to hear. Thanks so much. So, Robbie Robin, what's I don't know if you caught me saying this. I'm going to be in the south of France in about 2 weeks, and I'm going to be taking more photos around Saint-Remy. So all of this is going to bring all the stuff you're reading about right now completely alive. And so I'm really pleased that I can share that with you, because I know you are immersed in it right now. So you're going to get the full experience. So that's what's waiting for you. So, really happy that I can share this with you as you're going through that journey. It's actually quite special. So really, really a nice thought. I'm going to try and do maybe 2 lives from Saint-Remy/Arles. So like while I'm actually there, and maybe share some photos and that sort of thing. Wow, I want to read it again. That's always the best compliment I can ever get, is because I know the feeling when I've read books. One of them is Centennial by James A. Michener. The book is so good, so perfect, so immersive, so like takes you along in the stream of consciousness that you don't want to get out of it. You want to jump back in, and even though you've read it, you read it again. It's like being in this long movie. That's wow. Chelsea says I read it twice. Okay, great to hear. Great to hear. Okay, so let's continue. He says, perhaps that is also true of the mountain. They will tell me that mountains are not like that and that there are black outlines of a finger's width. But after all, it seemed to me that it expressed a passage in Rod's book, one of the very rare passages of his which I found good, about a country of somber mountains, lost among which one perceives some dark goatherds' huts where sunflowers are blooming. The olives with white clouds and backgrounds of mountains, also the moonrise and the night effect. He's talking about Starry Night, I think. These are exaggerations from the point of view of arrangement. Their lines are warped as that of old wood. Must say, what a incredible description of Starry Night. Their lines are warped as that of old wood. I wonder whether he was looking at wood when he thought of that. I mean, think of these as knots in wood, you know. Definitely quite a concept. Robbie Robbins says, I keep lingering on paragraphs, so it's taking me ages. I know I do. I did that a lot with Ernest Becker, although it's not so much beautifully written, but incredibly compelling and incredibly powerful and insightful stuff. And you it's almost like if you read more than a page, you've got to stop and just let it sink in. And it's so rich and it's so thick with meaning that you kind of got to pause. Anyway, so he goes on to say, the olives are much more in character. As in the other study, I try to express the time of day when you see the green rose beetles and the, is it cicadas? I always forget how to say it. Is it cicadas? How do you say it? Um, how do you pronounce it again? Pronunciation. Cicadas. Cicadas. There we go. Cicadas. Okay. Why don't they spell it that way? Cicadas. Okay. Yvonne says, here are a few pennies for your trip to France, perhaps a cafe or lait or pastry. Thanks so much, Yvonne. Um, just to let you know, I can't really tell you what a nightmare it's been just trying to apply for visas. So I'm going to be traveling with Bria. I wish she was here, and also someone else, my graphic designer. But getting her visa has just been incredibly difficult. It was actually refused, and we had to drive all the way back to apply again. But the good news is because she's coming along, the photography, the sort of footage of where we're staying, where we're going, what we're seeing, there's going to be so much more of it. Because if it was just me, I tend to take photos and so on, but sometimes at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't really feel like sharing it. I just enjoyed it and I'm kind of tired. But now when you've got another person that's recording it, it's kind of her job to put it together. So we're going to do some like hotel reviews, but also we're going to be like on this channel. We're also going to be doing very much the fabric of Vincent van Gogh. And now you're not only going to have one writer, photographer on the ground, you're going to have two. And so, and then Bria will also be there. So this is really going to be a treat for you guys, really going to be quite special. So I hope you guys are going to join me. Cicada, yeah. Cicada. Um, I hope you guys are going to join me and relish it as much as we are. I think it's really going to be enjoyable. Uh, I've also booked a trip to the Camargue, and I don't know if you know this. The Camargue and the horses of the Camargue are directly south of Arles, and that's certainly one area Van Gogh never got to. I don't think he ever painted the horses of the Camargue, and he was right there. So, quite interesting. Iceland says that is super exciting. Yeah, it is. Okay, let's try and finish up this letter. So he says, talks about the green rose beetles and the, how do you say it, cicadas flying about in the heat. So it's still quite warm there in September. So it'll be interesting to see what he talks about the temperature in October, which is when I'll be there, right at the end of October. The other canvases, the reap, etc., are not dry. And now in the bad weather, I'm going to make a lot of copies for really, I must do more figures. It is the study of the figure that teaches you to seize the essential and to simplify. Then he comes back to his brother's letter and responding to it. He says, when you say in your letter that I have done nothing but work, no, that is not right. I am myself very, very dissatisfied with my work. So this is how he's feeling. And you kind of get the feeling, if there's one thing that has given him inspiration and hope and joy, has been his work. And now he's thinking about it in a totally different way. Although the paintbrush is giving him pleasure, at the same time, he feels like the body of work he has behind him, he's saying he feels very dissatisfied with it. And this is going to sound silly, but I feel the same about my first probably 2 or 3 years of YouTube videos. They weren't very well. I mean, I didn't script them. They weren't very well edited. Sometimes when I come across them, I'm tempted to just delete them. And so I think what that shows is how your work has evolved. Like if you can look back at your work and be like kind of embarrassed, then that is a sign of how much you've grown in terms of executing it. And I think he's at that place as well, where he's able to look at all his work and say, wow, I can do better than this. I should do better than this. I need to do better than this, right? And then he says, the only thing that comforts me is that people with experience say, and this gives you a sense of what a tough hombre Van Gogh is, how hard he's prepared to work. He says, people with experience say, you must paint for 10 years for nothing. Now, how many people do you know who would do that? Who would say, I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to work in this job for 10 years without being paid, and then only am I good enough, or only then can I call myself whatever, right? That is, as you say, Mel, that's real humility. That is definitely real humility. My voice is starting to go. Iceland, you're really making my day. Iceland says they are rare gems, and I really love seeing how they evolved over the years and the new content that has come. Yeah, they certainly are loud and noisy. I got to know them sizzling in South Korea. Did Vincent ever set eyes on the Eiffel Tower? Well, he set eyes on the beginning of its construction, as far as I know. Let me just have a look. You must remember Vincent lived in Paris in 1887. So if you look at this, the construction began in January 1887 and was finished the year that he went into the asylum. So I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't see the completed Eiffel Tower. He didn't see that, but good question. Good question. Okay. Now a better period may come, but I shall have to get the figures stronger, and I must refresh my memory by a very close study of Delacroix and Mallet. again, you get a real sense of just how intense this guy is. He's prepared to work, as we would say in South Africa, he's ollie off. He's prepared to really graft. He is really humble, right? Imagine if a YouTuber felt that way. I'm gonna work for 10 years before I monetize my videos. Imagine if they did that. Look how much respect he has for, in a way, his audience, the viewer of his art. Then he says, then I shall try to get my drawing clearer, yet misfortune is good for something. You gain time for study. I'm adding to the roll of canvases a study of flowers, nothing much, but after all, I do not want to tear it up. Long letter. In all this batch, I think nothing at all good save. In all this batch, I think nothing at all good save the field of wheat, the mountain, the orchard, the olives, or the blue hills, and the portrait, and the entrance to the quarry. And the rest says nothing to me because it lacks individual intention and feeling in the line. So that's what he's trying to put into his art. Individual intention. Now, how do you put individual intention into your art? I don't think he even includes Starry Night as the pictures that speak to him. He says, in all this batch, I think nothing at all good save the field of wheat, the mountain, the orchard, the olives. It isn't, I mean, he is including Starry Night. He doesn't seem to think it's worth much himself. Field with poppies, I actually like. So that's his own opinion of that, right? He's saying Starry Night lacks individual intention. It lacks feeling in the lines. Where these lines are close and deliberate, it begins to be a picture, even if it is exaggerated. That is a little what Bernard and Gauguin feel. They do not ask the correct shape of a tree at all, but they insist absolutely that one can say if the shape is round or square, and my word, they are right, exasperated as they are by certain people's photographic and empty perfection. Certainly, they will not ask the correct tone of the mountains, but they will say, in the name of God, the mountains were blue, weren't they? So he's a colorist. He's painting in terms of color and the intentions of the scene, which is a very different way, very expressionistic way of painting what you're seeing in front of you. Then chuck on some blue and don't go telling me that it was blue rather like this or like that. It was blue, wasn't it? Good. Make them blue and it's enough. This is how he's feeling disappointed in his previous art. He's getting a stronger sense of what he wants to say and how he wants to say it. Mel says, I haven't known you as long as everyone here, but I greatly appreciate and truly admire your brilliant mind. Thanks, Mel. That's sweet of you. Then he says, Gauguin is sometimes like a genius when he explains this, but as for the genius Gauguin has, he is very timid about showing it. It's quite interesting how this is a bit of a snipe at Gauguin, where he says Gauguin is quite a timid guy. And maybe that's something he said to Gauguin's face. You've got a great mind, but you're very timid about showing it. And it is touching the way he likes to say something really useful to the young. How strange he is all the same. Again, quite a interesting comment on Gauguin. Is some of his real feelings about Gauguin coming out here. It gives me great pleasure that Jo is well, and I think that you will feel much more in your element thinking of her pregnancy and, of course, having worries too, than alone without these family worries. For you will feel more as one with nature. When you think of Millet and Delacroix, what a contrast. Delacroix without a wife, without children. Millet surrounded by a big family more than anybody. Can you see how he thinks of other artists in terms of his own situation, right? It's quite interesting. Then he says, and yet what similarities there are in their work. So Uwe has still kept his big studio and is working on a decoration. That man came very near to being an excellent painter. It is money trouble with him. He is forced to do 1,000 things rather than painting, and it costs him more money than it brings in for a living when he does do something beautiful. And he's quickly losing his knack of drawing with a brush. That is probably caused by the old way of education, which is the same as nowadays in the studios. They fill in the outlines. And Dumier was always painting his face in the mirror to learn to draw. Do you know what I think of pretty often? What I always said to you some time ago, that even if I did not succeed, all the same, I thought that what I've worked at will be carried on. What a brave sentiment. You know, what matters is the work that I'm doing. You know, I'm taking some knowledge of the world, some knowledge of the human condition, some connection I'm making to our common human predicament, and maybe someone else can just take that further and do it better. Not directly, but one isn't alone in believing things that are true. Again, that's also what an incredible insight there. You know, that is something that he feels as an artist, but also as someone who's reading the same concepts about life in books. And so think about it, whether you're writing books or painting pictures, you're trying to communicate, in essence, similar concepts. Quite powerful. How much harder isn't it to paint some of these concepts? Robbie Robbins is like beginning to build a cathedral and never seeing it finished. Yeah. And I mean, you know, what's incredible about a certain time was that would often happen. People would take centuries to build. What was it? Centuries. I mean, there's a church in Barcelona that still isn't finished. But you know, there were some buildings that would take more than one lifetime to complete. And how many people today live in that sense where they say someone else is going to complete my work and I'm okay to do a portion of it. Someone else is going to complete it in their lifetime, and they're going to enjoy it and they're going to have it. If anything, we live in the opposite, where we say, I'm going to use this, I'm going to take this, I'm going to destroy this. Someone else is going to have to pick up the pieces. It's a completely, you know, if you say Van Gogh is humble and hardworking and self-sacrificing, it feels like the society we live in today is the opposite. Arrogant, selfish, destructive, um, disconnected, all of those things. Lisa says, Nick is a living art installation in my life. Okay. Yeah, no, that's well said. Yvonne says, individual intention in art is like an episode coming on. It's interesting if you think about the word stroke, you know, the stroke of an art, the stroke um, of a brush, you know, and how many strokes you need to create a picture. And then also that a stroke can also be a stroke, right? Okay, let's continue. That's why I just think there's so much we can learn, so much that is subtle and different from Van Gogh's life and times. And he was just such an enigma to when he lived, but it's such an interesting contrast to our lives today. And in a way, there's tremendous hope and tremendous encouragement, I feel, in how deprived he was and how, in a way, motivated and happy and inspired he was. And the things that inspired him, you know, just light and color and perspective, seeing something in a certain way. and being caught up in your own sense of mission, having your own, giving yourself your own mission, right? That's part of something bigger. Anyway, he says, and what does it personally matter then? I feel so strongly that it is the same with people as it is with wheat. Now, is that ever a true statement coming from him? Like he really did see um, wheat as a symbol of people, and wheat goes through different cycles, um, sowing, growing, reaping, right? And don't we go through those same cycles? Even without dying, we reap what we sow, we grow, we reap again and again and again. I think a lot of the time we want to reap. Do we allow enough time for growing? Do we allow enough time for sowing? Right? Many, many strokes. Okay. Then he says, if you are not sown in the earth to germinate there, what does it matter? In the end, you are milled to become bread. So, can you see how he's saying, if you are not sown, he's thinking about a person in terms of wheat. If you are not in the earth to germinate there, what does it matter? If you're not grounded, in the end, you are milled to become bread, right? The difference between happiness and unhappiness, both are necessary and useful. They're saying even unhappiness is good. You learn from it. You stuck in a place. It's a time where you can learn about life or learn a skill or whatever. It's saying death and disappearance are also necessary and useful. It is so relative and with life equally. I mean, yeah, you've got a guy who's in an asylum, he's all alone, he's overwhelmed, and he can be so philosophical about the situation he's in and see things with such a revolutionary sense of perspective. I mean, he is in a terrible place. His health is really poor. He is aware that he's very aware of his own mortality. And if you could tell him, you could say, Vincent, you're not going to be alive for you will be you're going to be alive for less than another year. And so what he's thinking isn't far-fetched. What he's thinking is practical and realistic for all intents and purposes. And yet he's able to have this perspective where he can see life as cycles of wheat and his own life as cycles of wheat, and not despair and say some of it's just the way it is. I mean, we all end up milled to become bread. What does it matter? And then you've got to provide your answer to that. If you say, what does it matter? Well, he's saying, what does my art matter? Well, my art matters because someone is going to carry on with it, not necessarily directly, but someone doing something similar to what I'm doing. Even during an illness, so we almost finished, even during an illness that breaks me up or frightens me, that belief is unshaken. And this is where he shows again his resilience. He's saying, even when I have an episode, even when I have an attack, um, I'm still anchored to a solid sense, a pattern that is running through all of our lives. Then he says, how I should have liked to see those Muniers. Well, let it be understood that if I were to write again expressly and briefly that I should like to go to Paris, I should have a reason for it, which I've explained above. That meanwhile there's no hurry, and that having warned you, I have confidence enough to wait for the winter and the attack which will perhaps come then. So he is expecting a decline. It's like late autumn at this point. Remember, this we're not quite chronologically in the same time. We are in mid-October, but he's in late September. He's a little bit behind our timeline, thanks to me. But he's basically dreading winter. That things as bad as they already are going to get worse. I think that's why he's feeling overwhelmed. Let's just have a look at, see if we can see any art by Munier. Constantin Munier, Belgian artist. The Miners. Can't quite. I'm just trying to open it up, but it's not doing that. Well, let me just show you what I'm seeing. And if I can, don't know why it's not opening. Yeah, anyway, not quite sure why it's not there. Okay, let's continue. Well, let it be understood that if I were to write again expressly and briefly, okay, we've gone through that. It says, meanwhile, there's no hurry, and that having warned you, I've confidence enough to wait for the winter. Gone through that. Then he says, but if it is a fit of religious exaltation again, then no delay. I would like to leave without giving reasons at once. Only we are not permitted, at least if it would be indiscreet, to meddle with his sister's management or even to criticize them. They have their beliefs and their own ways of doing good to others. Sometimes they do very well, but I do not warn you lightly, and it is not to recover more liberty or anything else that I don't have. So let's wait very calmly till an opportunity to settle things presents itself. It is a great advantage that my stomach works well, and then I do not think I am so sensitive to cold. And besides, I know what to do when the weather is bad, having this project of copying lots of things that I like. So that's his strategy. I should very much like to see Malay reproductions in the schools. I think there are children who would become painters if only they saw good things. Say hello to Joe and a handshake. Goodbye for now. Ever yours, Vincent. So he actually writes another letter on the 19th. So remember, he's written one to his sister, then another one to his brother, and then I think another one to his mother, or to his parents, well, his mother. I don't know why it says parents because his father's no longer alive, but anyway, it's to his mother. And we'll deal with that letter in the next Van Gogh letters, 91. Um, and then I think there's just one more, and then we're done with September. And then we are into October. One more. Yeah, then we're into October. So I'm going to do another Van Gogh letters probably on Saturday or Sunday, which will bring us up to um, I might need to do two Van Gogh letters between now and maybe next week. So I might do Van Gogh letters on Saturday and Sunday. I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll see how far I can get. But as you can tell, beyond the 2 hour mark, my voice isn't that strong. Okay. I must have quite enjoyed this Van Gogh letters because the letters themselves were quite enjoyable, I felt. And it was also really good having you guys here, 2 birthday girls. It was actually Chelsea's birthday not that long ago as well. Seems like quite a few of you have your birthdays in September and October, right? Ison, if you're still here, we're still wishing you a very happy birthday. Happy birthday to Mel as well for 2 days ago. Um, Lisa says, life is art, life is a struggle, but worth it. Art that struggles to come into being is also worth it as well. It means something, right? Anything that takes effort tends to mean something. Um, my just a quick note. My graphic designer's never ever flown ever. She's never flown anywhere, right? And so she's about to fly to Rome and um, other places. So this is going to be, in a way, quite an amazing, um, what's the word, revelation. You know, the world that exists beyond her front door, kind of thing. And so I'm really pleased and excited to share that with her. And you know, she's a photographer, and I'm interested to see how she sees the world. And I mean, I've seen certain things before. I haven't seen Italy before, but it'll be interesting to see how what she says about whatever she sees. It'll be quite interesting. Um, and yeah, I'll be sharing some of her photographs and my photographs with you guys um, towards the end of this month. So it should be quite fun. Should be quite interesting. Um, epic collab. Yeah. Okay, guys. Again, thanks a lot for joining me. Thanks so much for the super chats, Robbie and Yvonne. Much appreciated. I mean, yeah, if it's expensive traveling with one, it's a lot more expensive traveling with two. But at least, oh, what I wanted to say is, you know, talking about meaningful. Her visa was initially refused or rejected, and so you had to work even harder just to get the visa in the first place. For most people, you know, like if you're from America, you don't even need a visa to travel to Italy, and so we've got to jump through all of these hoops, and so I think that will make our trip so much more meaningful. The struggle. I mean, she only just heard yesterday that her visa's been approved, and it's been weeks and weeks and weeks and quite a lot of money driving up and staying somewhere and giving in documents and them calling and saying we don't have this, we need that, and all the stress, weeks and weeks of that going on. And so I think when you're there, it feels like you've earned it, whereas I think a lot of other people who just can go whenever they want to and they don't even need a visa. I think us South Africans really appreciate um, the opportunity that we can go to certain places because it's not so easy. It's made a lot more difficult for some of us. So yeah, it should be quite interesting. Chelsea says, just relax now. Yeah, that I think we do need to. Robbie says, I'm going to get back to my book when the live is over. You do that. Well, the live is just about over. Robbie, again, I'm really excited to share the on the ground, in the fabric of the Van Gogh story stuff with you. That's really going to be quite special. Thanks a lot, Ison. Ison, have a wonderful rest of your birthday. I really hope we do bump into each other again. I don't know when or where, but I do hope that we do. Okay, guys. Robbie says, I'm so excited too. That's good. Okay, guys, take care. I'll see you guys again Saturday or Sunday. Sorry about the couple of times that I did set it up and I didn't come live. But like I said, water, I think it was water contamination and other things going on as well. So, wow, Stephanie's here. You're going to have to watch the replay. I was just about to say somewhere in this live, where is Stephanie? We're missing you. And so it's really good to see you. Stephanie says happy birthday, Iceland. So couldn't be better. Good to have most of you in chat. Iceland says thank you all for being here. Okay. Thanks, guys. Stephanie, enjoy the replay. I think it's going to be worth watching and listening to, definitely. Yeah. Work, work, work. Same here. Stephanie says missing all of you too. Okay. Okay, guys. Lots to look forward to. And so I'll leave you guys on that note. Take care.